Hello, I'm Ally Christiani, and welcome to Address the Disconnect, Series 2, Systemic Racism in Policing. Since the inception of police forces in America, they have been used as the overseer of maintaining minority oppression. In this video, I will explore the idea of police in this country and how their brutality played a hand in some of America's deadliest riots and greatest calls for change. Slave patrols were created in response to the increase in runaways and almost successful uprisings like the Stono Rebellion in 1740. The first slave patrols began in South Carolina to help enforce these new slave codes that soon spread to the surrounding southern states. Slave patrols were groups of white volunteers who used violent and abusive tactics to maintain the law. Slave patrols gained more power after the passing of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which furthered the control of the slave-holding states. In the 1830s, where the creation of a police force begins formally in the city of Boston. The only difference is they were now publicly funded and recognized. By the 1890s, every state in America had its own police force. After the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, we see the laws evolve from slave codes to black codes. As laws evolved to preserve the racial hierarchy, so did the purpose of policing to adhere to them. The black codes were quickly outlawed by the 13th and 14th Amendments, which allowed them to then grow into the laws of Jim Crow. The Jim Crow laws legalized discrimination, and the slave patrols began to police, and particularly in the South, that meant implementing segregation and turning their backs to violent acts against the black community, including lynching. In the 1960s, the militarization of the police began under President Nixon when he declared the war on drugs. Standard war equipment used to battle on international grounds, now in the hands of the less experienced or trained to use against their citizens on domestic soil. A former Nixon domestic policy advisor, John Ehrlichman, later confirmed that the effort by the war on drugs was intended to harm black communities. He's quoted as saying to Harper's Magazine that the Nixon White House had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, end quote. Throughout history, black people have always fought for their basic human and civil rights against police brutality. But it was especially during the civil rights era where these riots and revolts really took a turn and hundreds of people died. In 1965, the Watts riots ensued in response to tensions growing between the black community in Los Angeles and the police that monitored them daily. 34 people died. Then during the long hot summer under Lyndon B. Johnson saw the Newark riots, the Detroit riots, and 157 more across the country, where more than 100 people died. 53 years past that time, 2020 saw its own version of the long hot summer, and I believe that we are in the most important phase of the civil rights era. I hope that we all continue to work hard to right all of these wrongs. As always, you can read the full article on the history of police brutality, the history of riots, and systemic racism in policing, available in my article that is on the Black blog, and I will include that link in the caption. Thanks again for addressing the disconnect.